was hosting my own talk show on Lifetime. And before we started the show, Dr. Hollander came into the green room and I said, I need to talk to you. And I said, I think I have OCD. He said, well, let's talk about it on the air. And so on live television, I said, I think I have this. Well, all hell broke loose. I was on Oprah, I was on the Today Show, I was on with Howard Stern because everybody wanted to talk about the guy who was hosting the messiest show on television as well on Double Dare had obsessive compulsive disorder. I remember my parents called me right after the show and said, why did you do that? I think you just destroyed your entire career. And they stopped talking to me for a year.
Wow.
Because they said I embarrassed them. The amount of hours that one wastes with OCD, trying to solve other people's problems, not only your own, is just a 100% waste of time. OCD can be the most exhausting thing you'll ever do. If you ask me, would I rather run 26 miles at the New York Marathon or have OCD, I'd rather run the 26 miles. OCD is miserable. It sucks. I hated every moment of it. And when I finally, in my early 40s, started to open the door to get the information and the tools to help me cope, was a life changer.
If you've liked the things that you've seen on the Get to Know OCD podcast and you want to know more about OCD, you can go to NOCD.com. We have tons of education. You can go to our NOCD YouTube channel and watch our webinars and other episodes of the podcast. And we hope that you will take advantage of everything that we have available to you. Hello, and welcome once again to another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. My name is Patrick McGrath. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer for NOCD. If you're looking for help for OCD, check out NOCD.com, where we have expert therapists waiting to meet with you. And if you like the Get to Know OCD podcast, well, you can subscribe on our NOCD YouTube channel or anywhere where you get your favorite podcast from. Today, I'm joined by Marc Summers. Hi, Marc.
Patrick, how are you?
I am doing well.
Good.
There's almost an Irish accent going on there. I like that. I like that. Marc, you've done Unwrapped, you have done Double Dare, and you have OCD, and you've been very open and vocal about that. And I'm excited to talk to you today. You have done things through the International OCD Foundation about OCD and awareness. You've got a book out about it. You have been on specials and talk shows talking about it. You and Howie, probably two of the most open people about having this condition, living with it, and figuring out how to survive and go out and work every day, and yet still, I'm sure, deal with the things going on in your head. So
every day.
That's an exciting talk for us to do, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, anything you want. I'm an open book.
Good. Well, and you have a book. So
yes,
there you go.
Everything in its place.
Why come out and talk about it?
To help other people. Okay. At this point in my life, I have nothing else to prove. I have been trying to retire the last 5 years, not been particularly good at it, so I'm working maybe now more than ever, back and forth to the East Coast doing stuff. But almost daily, somebody comes up to me and says, I think I have OCD, but I'm not sure. Okay. Or I have OCD and it's affecting my marriage. Or my kids have OCD and I don't know what to do. And I always start off by saying, I am not a doctor, but I can tell you my story, which may or may not relate to you. But more importantly, there are so many places you can get help. And that's why I love what you guys are doing, OCD.
Thank you.
Because that didn't exist a few years ago.
Right. And
you would try to find a proper doctor. And, not everybody gets along with the doctor that you recommend. Plus, there's generally a waiting list, or there was, just to get an appointment to meet with people. And some people don't deal with kids, or some people, there's specialties that they have.
Yeah.
So if I can help the tiniest amount, either by expressing what I've gone through or giving a direction as to where people might check it out, I kind of think that's my purpose in life right now.
That's awesome. And you were starting to recognize, talking to you and reading your book, you were starting to recognize symptoms at age 6.
Yeah.
What were you noticing that was different about you, even that young, compared to other people maybe?
I was fastidious as hell. I wanted everything to be perfect. And if I was wearing clothing that didn't fit the proper way or had a spot on it, and I was wearing a pair of pants that had these little marks on them that were, I guess, stylish at the time. And one of these little marks was a thread that was coming out. Mm. And I went and got a pair of scissors and cut it and put a hole in my pants. Mm-hmm. And I thought my mother was going to have a conniption fit.
Sure.
What did you do? Why did you do that? And I did it because it made me feel so uncomfortable that was sticking up. As a 6-year-old kid, I wasn't as coordinated as I perhaps should have been, and I dug too deep and I put a hole in these pants that they just bought. And I had hell to pay for that.
Yeah.
So I knew what I did needed to be done at that particular time, but if something else came up like that in the future, I had to be particularly careful so I didn't, quote, ruin anything else. And I didn't want to give away that I had these feelings inside.
Yeah.
I didn't know what intrusive thoughts were.
Sure.
But my dad had a grocery store, and he closed it at 8 o'clock, and if he wasn't home by 9 o'clock, my mother would panic, and she would start calling hospitals thinking that he was held up or was in a car accident. And that played into my intrusive thoughts. So I then put the pressure on myself that unless I did things perfect, something bad was going to happen to my dad. And that was the first of my intrusive thoughts. And if something did happen to him, it was my fault because I didn't do X right or Y right. And so that just continued to snowball. And I was able to camouflage that until I got in high school. And I was a pretty good A-B student. And then I had to read paragraphs over and over and over again. And my grades started to go in the toilet. But I could not move forward unless I read that paragraph properly. And sometimes I'd have to read it 17, 18, 19, 20 times.
Sure.
Well, if you have 4 subjects and you have to do homework, if you spend that much time reading one paragraph in a history book, you're never going to get to the other stuff. And it got to the point where I got so tired I couldn't complete my homework and the grades started to go downhill. And I didn't know what this was. I just knew that if I didn't do this, bad things were going to happen. Or so I told myself.
Right. And how many people did OCD end up murdering, killing, causing to go to the hospital or anything like that? Or
I don't think anybody did.
Nobody, right?
Yeah.
And isn't that amazing? That's always what I find fascinating when I'm talking to people. There's always, well, it hasn't yet, but I think the next time.
Yeah. And if
it
it happened, it's my fault.
Right.
And I don't want the pressure on me. So it's easier for me to go back and read that sign 11 times than it is to put the pressure on myself that something's bad going to happen to, when I was doing a talk show in New York, and my son was playing soccer, and my daughter was auditioning for shows, and I would walk around New York City for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, telling myself that if I didn't read the sign in Tiffany's window properly, that Matthew would not make the soccer team or Meredith would not get a partner next show. And so I put all that pressure on me, not realizing that maybe they didn't have the talent, or maybe they didn't really want it, and I wanted it more for them. And I think about the time, the hours that I spent trying to make myself feel better, as opposed to talking to them and saying, do you really want to be on that show? Or do you really want to be on the team? Or is it just me? And that's the other thing, the amount of hours that one wastes with OCD, trying to solve other people's problems, not only your own, is just a 100% waste of time. And
that time that OCD takes away, OCD won't take the blame for, of course.
No. Not their fault at all.
Yeah.
It's my fault.
Totally.
And I'll put it all on me. And I knew it was stupid. That's the thing. I knew that what I was doing made 0 sense. I was smart enough to do that, and yet I was not smart enough to say, well, maybe I better do it, just in case.
Right.
And I couldn't get to the logical part of that whole situation. And it wasn't until I was hosting my own talk show on Lifetime called Biggers and Summers, that we had Dr. Eric Hollander on, and I read the material the night before, and I thought, oh God, I do this. I didn't know what OCD was. I didn't know it had a name.
Really?
So now I had to go on TV the next day and say a lie that this didn't affect me, or open up and tell the truth. And before we started the show, Dr. Hollander came into the green room, and I said, I need to talk to you. And I said, I think I have OCD. And he said, why? And I gave him some things. He said, well, let's talk about it on the air. And so on live television at 11:30 that morning, I said, I think I have this. Well, all hell broke loose. First of all, I was on Oprah, I was on the Today Show, I was on with Howard Stern, because everybody wanted to talk about the guy who was hosting the messiest show on television as well, on Double Dare, had obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, OCD is not just neatness and cleanliness, but it was a part of my life, and I was hosting this crazy show where we were throwing green liquids at people. And I remember my parents called me right after the show and said, why did you do that? I think you just destroyed your entire career. And I made some mention that I got it from my parents, and they denied it. Oh, we don't do that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Of course.
And then when I got on Oprah, well, first of all, I was in People magazine, and I specifically pointed my parents out having this thing, and they denied it, and they stopped talking to me for a year.
Wow.
Because they said I embarrassed them, and that what I said they did, they didn't. Well, they did. They just wouldn't admit it.
Yeah.
And I was getting ready to do Oprah, and I called them because they lived in Indianapolis, and I said, I'm going to be in Chicago doing Oprah. You got to come up. And they said, why are you going to be on Oprah? And I said, to talk about OCD. And they said, we don't want anything to do with that. And eventually they did come up. They didn't come to the show, and we had sort of a meeting of the minds, and we started to put it back together. But, back then, why are you airing our dirty laundry? We don't talk about those things. We had a cleaning lady come to the house on Fridays, and my dad's closet was like a show place. And if she moved one of his shoes, 1/16 of an inch, he knew it. And he would go absolutely out of his mind. Well, I grew up with that. And both their parents had it. So when I would go to Toledo, Ohio to be with my grandmother, I spent the whole time cleaning. I was cleaning windows. I was washing things in her house that she couldn't get to because she was too old. So I spent 2 weeks straightening, cleaning, and so that's what they grew up. And now I was doing it as well. So it kept getting reinforced.
Right. And how did you work to stop that going to the next generation in your family, or has it? I mean, and only if you're willing to talk about that.
No. My kids are very open about that whole situation. I say my son has a trace of it. He is not as fastidious as I was, and I don't believe he has intrusive thoughts. We've had minor conversations about it. My daughter is a lot like me. Everything has to be perfect, and she has 2 small kids. I don't know how she does it, but if you walk into her house, man, somehow or another, I always applaud her that she can pull it off. Now, my brother does not have it. My sister does have it, and so I guess it can skip somebody in the family every now and then.
Yeah.
But most of the people on both my mom and dad's side who I know, cousins and everybody, they all have it. And Ashkenazi Jews, people who were born in Russia, Romania, Hungary, stuff like that, seem to pass it down. It's in the genes.
I think there was a recent study that came out on that, talking about some genetic links and heritage like that.
I heard about it years ago, and so I'm sure it's been improved even more with the knowledge.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
So you do Oprah, you've got the People magazine, and you've got the TV show. Where is OCD with Double Dare? Because that's when I tell people what I do and they know about you and they say, oh, like that guy did that show and there was green slime everywhere. And part of it is for me to educate people about OCD, that it's not just about cleanliness.
Right.
But going back to that idea that you had a spot on your pants when you were 6 years old and now you're doing a TV show where there's stuff flying all over the place. How did that work for you?
Well, when I auditioned, I didn't know about the mess. And I get the job, and I go into Philadelphia the first day, and they're pouring chocolate syrup on a slide and putting whipped cream at the bottom of that. And I said, what's going on here? And they said, well, this is the obstacle course. And I said, I don't know what that is. Nobody told me about that. And they said, well, at the end, whoever has the most points, that team gets to run the obstacle course and win prizes. Oh, okay. So the first 65 episodes, I didn't get a drop on me. I learned how to dodge that stuff like crazy. And they did a focus group, and the kid said, we love this show, and it put Nickelodeon on the map and me. But they said in the focus groups, we want to get the host, Mark, messy. So the executives at Nickelodeon said, we love you. We're picking up your contract. We're going to shoot 130 more of these things, but you got to get messy. I said, what? Why? Well, the kids want it. So the next thing I know, if I get to the obstacle course, can I throw a pie in your face? Or can I throw you in the vat of slime or whatever? And I had waited my whole life. I didn't get Double Dare till I was 34. When I came to Los Angeles in 1973, my goal was to host a television show, primarily a game show or a talk show. So I'm 34. I finally got my opportunity. I was not going to blow that for anything. You could take a bucket of horse manure and pour it over me, because if I didn't do that, that job was going to go away. And that was definitely not going to happen. Now, what I don't like is when people say, oh, he had a miserable time, he hated every minute of it. That is not true at all. I loved every minute of it, and I had the greatest time ever. Now, when the show was over, did I want to take off my clothes and take a shower instantaneously? 100%. In fact, the network will tell you that I would start to undress in front of the kids. I would start taking off my tie and then my shirt, and finally they said to me, can you do that backstage, and I went, do what? And they said, you're taking off your clothes in front of the audience. And I didn't even realize I was doing it.
Wow.
But my presence on TV was one thing, but afterwards, I just wanted to get it off of me.
Yeah.
And so I learned quickly, after I was told, that let's not take off your clothes in front of a bunch of 9, 10, 11-year-old kids. Let's wait till we go. Yeah, not a good idea. And so I dealt with it, and it's amazing how you can overcome those kinds of situations. And we brought it back right before COVID and did it for a couple of years. I toured it, God knows how many years. We used to sell out the Palace of Auburn Hills in Detroit, 20,000 people, twice a weekend. And you know what? I had a great time. People were entertained. They were paying me a boatload of money. What's wrong with this? I can afford to get messy and sloppy and be uncomfortable, whatever that was. But I learned because after I did my talk show and Dr. Hollander started me on the path of getting better, I was able to cope with it without any problem. And, that's why I tell people when they're on the verge of, I don't know if I can go to behavior therapy and I don't know if it's going to work. Well, until you try it, you don't have any freaking idea.
Right.
And it changed my life, you know? It just made me understand why I was doing these things. Was I in complete control? I'm not in complete control today.
We aren't now. The light could fall on us here.
Of course.
Yeah, right.
But as far as how to deal with obsessive compulsive disorder, I have the tools to do that now, which I didn't prior to my talk show with Dr. Hollander. And it's the best thing. And it was initially a scary moment, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. And do you still practice those tools all the time?
I have to.
Right.
If I'm going to function on a daily basis, I have to. Because I know when I'm starting to read things in a grocery store too many times, and I can tell myself, stop it. This is stupid. And reading that can of soup perfectly, whatever the hell that means, isn't going to change your life any way, shape, or form. Now, it does depend on stress. I just started my first movie for Hallmark. I was a nervous wreck. So on my time off, I would take walks. And one day I got stuck in a grocery store because I had to worry about, am I going to remember all my lines for tomorrow? And did I do today the way it should have been done? Because I've never done this before. So I would get stuck. And the first aisle I hit captured me. And I would start to read the damn cans. And sometimes I got stuck in there 10 or 15 minutes until I had the conversation with myself that, okay, this is stupid. What are you doing? And I walked out. Now, I wish I could have stayed and finished my task. And I could do that sometimes, but other days I couldn't.
Yeah.
But I could at least rationalize with myself knowing that reading that can the proper way, whatever the hell that means, would have no difference on whether I memorized the lines tomorrow or whether I did a good job. If I was a good actor, I was going to be a good actor whether I read that can or not.
Yeah.
And those are the conversations you have with yourself.
I think that's hard sometimes when people come in for treatment and they say to me, so I'll be cured, right? I'll never have these thoughts ever again. And
Never.
I've treated so many people with OCD. I have the constant thoughts now. I mean, if you and I were on a staircase, I'd think about pushing you down the stairs. I wouldn't do it, but I've treated so many people for that now I can't take stairs without thinking that anymore.
That's funny.
So can you speak to that about you can live life with OCD?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I always say I'm 82% cured. Where I came with that number, I don't know. But I have good days and bad days, but I have much more good days than I do bad days. And like I said, I have the tools to know how to work with what it is I have. And it doesn't pop up that much anymore. If there's something on the line, either in my career or something that my kids need or want, I tend to lean in that direction more so. But if I don't hear from my kids needing or wanting something, or my wife and whatever, doesn't cross my mind too much. When I'm by myself, I've been traveling a lot recently. And I do take walks. I try to walk a minimum 5 miles a day, but I was in New York for 6 months doing my one-man show, and I did 625 miles in 6 months. I rode over 1 million steps. And so there were days when I was down in Chinatown or in Little Italy where I'd see a candy store and I'd go in and I'd get stuck for a few minutes anyway saying, tell me a little bit about that, and can I see that jar or whatever? And but I was able to get out of those things pretty darn quick. It's not an everyday occurrence. I got to put a percentage on it. I don't know, maybe 45% in a week. Something will pop up, but most of the time I'm able to move on, and I just have the ability to not get obsessed with whatever that feeling is at that time. But it took a long time to get there.
Oh.
It was not an overnight thing. And when I started going to behavior therapy classes, I had a bunch of people who were so negative in that class, and I would get upset. We had one guy who was a phlebotomist who was germ phobic, okay? And I said to him, he wanted to be a doctor. I said, sir, can I suggest something? Find another line of work. Because every week he would come in and complain about how he can't deal with the germs, but I want to go to medical school. There's certain things you can do to cure your problem pretty darn quick if you want. I admire the fact that he wanted to do these things, but he was not working on it. And I eventually walked out of this behavior therapy class because I was tired of the negativity.
Yeah.
And I got up one day and I said, you know what, guys? I don't know about you, but I want to get better. And with all due respect, I'm sick and tired about hearing what you're not doing on a regular basis. So I'm going to go work on this elsewhere, not with you guys. And I left. And that's when Dr. Hollander helped me tremendously. And if you have time on your hands, you can look up, Dateline followed me for about a year. And they did a piece on me about coming out and having OCD. And they followed me, and they went and watched some of the sessions I had with Dr. Hollander. And my graduation 9 months to a year later was, they came to my house at 7 a.m, and they said, you got to leave now. And I said, well, where am I going? They said, we don't care. We'll call you when you can come back. Well, we had done a whole expose of my house, how everything was perfect and how I would straighten the fringe and the curtains were perfect, one thing after another. And they called me at 11 o'clock and said, okay, you can come back now. And I came back and I walked in, and they had turned my living room into a TV studio. And everything that was perfect wasn't anymore.
Oh.
And that was my graduation. And when I walked in the door, my knees buckled.
Yeah.
Because all I could think about was, how the hell do I put it back the way it was?
Right.
And after I took a breath and I sat down with Sarah James, who did a great job on this thing from NBC, and she said to me, how do you feel? And I couldn't catch my breath. But you know what? I eventually did. And when they left, I put it back, and it was fine. Was it perfect the way it was? Probably not. But I had so much therapy at that point, and at the time I was on medication. I was on Luvox at the time. I was able to cope. And just getting to that point of being able to cope was an insane battle. But it took me 2 years to get there, you know.
If I'm correct, I believe I watched that. There was a piece where you are with the scissors on the fringe of the carpet.
Not scissors, but I was straightening it over and over and over again. Yeah. And the way I finally got to Dr. Hollander was I talked to my wife about doing the segment and said, it was great therapy and whatever, having this conversation, and I had his phone number. And it drove my kids and my wife crazy that I would straighten things. So I would wait till they would go to bed, and I'd get up at 1 o'clock in the morning and start straightening things. And Alice caught me on my hands and knees straightening the fringe on the rug at about 1:30, and she said, what in the hell are you doing? And I said, I have no idea. And she said, you have the number of that doctor? And I said, yeah. She said, you're calling him tomorrow. And I did. And thank God I did.
That's a tough decision, to finally start facing your fears.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And, we've heard you, Howie, talk about external motivators can be involved in that. Not everybody has those, right?
No.
Sometimes. And even though you may have that, you have to keep that internal motivator to stay in therapy and to keep doing it. What continued to drive you to move up the hierarchy, face those fears, and get that life back?
Two things. I was sick of doing it. I was exhausted. OCD can be the most exhausting thing you'll ever do. If you ask me, would I rather run 26 miles at the New York Marathon or have OCD, I'd rather run the 26 miles because that's easier. When you have OCD and you're not properly diagnosed and you're thinking about it all the time, it will make you insane. Plus, it was starting to affect the kids.
Okay.
They didn't want to bring anybody to the house because I would follow them around with Lysol or carpet cleaner or something. So they'd be in the middle of doing some artwork. One day, Trevor, who is now 40 years old, was at our house making cookies for the holidays. And I always thought of Trevor, with all due respect, as Pigpen in the Peanuts, cartoons. And he was covered from head to toe with flour. And he said, I have to go to the bathroom. And I said, don't move. And I went and got a dust buster, and I dust busted this kid. Okay? Swear to God. He still talks about it to this day.
Yeah.
He's a doctor now, too. That's not a good thing to do.
No.
When you have a kid over that is a friend of your child, and they get dust busted by the father. Listen, I had a reputation in my neighborhood. We had moved into a new house, and the new house, of course, was perfect. My daughter was going to turn 1, and my son was about 5. And I said to Alice, can we do the birthday party somewhere else? Like, can we go to a bowling alley, or I'll take everybody to Disneyland, whatever you want. I just don't want anybody in the house. And Alice's line was, we bought this house, we're going to use it. Well, the little kids I didn't care about because most of them were going to be carried by their moms. But 5-year-olds can make a mess. So I figured out how tall the average 5-year-old kid was. And I went and bought butcher paper and lined my entire house with butcher paper so that if kids got crayons or fingerprints because they were dirty and outside, they could touch the walls, but they weren't touching the walls. They were touching the butcher paper.
The butcher paper.
And the word got around the neighborhood, and people for that entire day were knocking on the door pretending to want a cup of sugar or some milk, and they'd look in and they went, oh my God, it's true. And they couldn't believe that this crazy man who just moved in next to him would put butcher paper up so kids wouldn't touch the walls. And that affects a family.
Gosh. Yeah.
Now, I can laugh at it now.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought it was funny at the time. But that's how desperate I was to keep everything perfect.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And the fact that I would even think in that direction. What can I get? And how can I figure out? I mean, there was no computer Google things. So I had to figure out, well, let's see. Matthew is this tall. He put his hand up, how much butcher paper do I need to buy to line the areas downstairs where they're going to be? And my wife thought I was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I did it.
I will never cease to be amazed by the creativity that OCD will go to get people to do compulsions in order to scratch that itch, right? And that's
what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do believe that OCD people have higher intelligence. I just think we do, because I guess we have to come up with ways to keep ourselves as normal as we can, whether it's normal for us or hiding our craziness to other people. But there are other traits. Here's something I've always wanted to ask a doctor. This is you. You are a doctor. Somebody told me, and I've had this conversation with other OCD patients, that people with OCD have a very high sex drive. True or false?
I haven't seen it outside of anything for any other condition that I've treated.
So there's no studies on it?
Not that I'm aware of. I can look that up.
I would love to know, because many of the people I talk to with OCD have a very high sex drive.
One thing that I have seen is that people may have the high drive, but if they have a contamination issue, it's very hard to fulfill.
Yeah, that's something I don't have, thank God. And people ask me about that all the time. How do you have sex? And it's like, what do you mean I have sex like you do? And they go, but doesn't the OCD bother you? Not at all.
No.
Not the least,
Right. There's even points where you may have, say, an adolescent boy who has a wet dream, nocturnal emission, who won't go to school the next day because what if they didn't shower enough? Oh. And if they didn't, there's still a sperm on them, and then they go to school and they sit down, and someone else sits on that chair,
and they're afraid they're going to get pregnant.
And the sperm will crawl up, find the vaginal canal, find an egg, and boom, now they've caused someone to become pregnant. Is that a sexual assault? So did they harm someone? Is that morally wrong? Did they violate a religious norm by, all of these things? That's where OCD will go.
Yeah, yeah. It shows its ugly head in so many different ways. The people who have body dysmorphic disorder, which is a form of OCD, and my left ear is a little bit lower than the right ear, and I think that Joan Rivers had OCD because this woman went in and had surgery every 20 minutes, and I always wonder about people who do that. I mean, is that body dysmorphic disorder, or is it just ego?
Yeah, I mean, BDD is a very serious condition, right? And it talks about the perceived flaws. There doesn't have to be a flaw. There doesn't have to be a difference. As long as it's perceived, that's enough for people. I mean, I've seen people in their teenage years with full heads of hair who are going to count if any hair falls out in the shower and what if I'm starting to go bald already?
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. There is no bounds where OCD or related conditions won't go to. to get somebody to check, to do a compulsion, look at a mirror for BDD, maybe something of that nature, because that utter fear of what if, those two words rule people's lives. And I'm wondering how much of your life has been ruled by the phrase, what if?
Well, it did for a long time. But now, I mentioned to you when I was talking to Howie, I use it as a positive because when I came to Los Angeles and wanted to get in the entertainment industry, I became a pain in the ass. And people would say to me, I will hire you if you just stop calling me. Leave me alone. I can't take it all the time. And so OCD drove me to become successful. Would I have been successful without OCD? I don't think so, because I think it made me push, constantly to get to the next level. And I would come up with the craziest ass ideas, and I would do anything. I'll give you a perfect example. I could not sing. I was working on the Mac Davis show doing warm-ups, and they were looking for somebody to be in a sketch on Donnie and Marie. And they wanted you to sing a song. Well, I don't know. I didn't sing. So the producers got me the audition, and I went in, and this is what I did. I brought in a big tub of water, and I put down 2 rubber duckies, like you would see on Sesame Street. And I sang Rubber Ducky, probably the worst version of it ever. And at the end of it, I picked up the pail of water and poured it over my head. And Art Fisher, who was the director and producer of the show, came up to me and said, that may be the worst thing I have ever seen in my entire life. But because you had the nerve and the guts to do it, I'm going to give you the job. And that's how I got my first national TV spot. Mm-hmm. I was always thinking outside the box. How will they recognize me? What can I do to get on television? And because I wanted it more than life itself, and I was passionate. I always said I was a kid in Indiana who had a desire and a passion to be in the entertainment industry, but I had zero talent. Therefore, I'm going to have to figure out another way to do what I want to do. And I constantly did it. I would lie. I was working as a page on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and there was a warm-up artist, Lorenzo Music. He was brilliant. He was the best warm-up guy I'd ever seen. He used to play Carlton, the doorman on Rhoda. And I watched him week after week after week, and I thought, man, this guy's amazing. So I went into his office when I got enough nerve one week, and I said, I do warm-ups. I'd never done warm-up in my life. He said, oh, what shows? And I lied, and I just named shows, because they never check anything in show business. Mm-hmm. He said, well, give me your number. Maybe someday if I can't do one of these, I'll call you. And I said, great. 3 weeks later, the phone rings. Hey, Mark, it's Lorenzo. How are you? I said, fine. He goes, we're doing a new show. It's a pilot at CBS called Doc. Barnard Hughes, who's on Broadway, is doing it. I can't be there. Can you do the warm-up for me? And I went, yeah, sure. Well, now I'm pooping my pants because I got a job, and I don't know how the hell to even do it. Yeah. So other than watching him, but I couldn't copy him because everybody in that studio has seen Lorenzo Music.
Of course.
So I couldn't do the Lorenzo Music show by Marc Summers. So I was a magician at the time, working at a place called the Magic Castle. I had some stand-up. I was doing magic tricks. And I put together what I thought would be the perfect warm-up. Well, whatever I did, I nailed it because Grant Tinker, who was the president of Mary Tyler Moore's company at the time, ran down, threw his arms around me and said, quote, that may be the best warm-up I've ever seen in my entire life. If you ask me today what I did, I have no idea. I was just shooting from the hip. But I then became known as the king of warm-ups, and I was doing Alice, Star Search, What's Happening Now, Webster. I was working 6 days a week. Tuesdays I did Alice. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday I did Hour Magazine. Wednesday and Thursday night I did Star Search. Friday I did Soap. Saturday I did game shows. I worked all the time, and back in when was it? Well, I started Double Dare in 86, so it was long before that. I was making 6 figures, asking people where they're from, doing warm-ups. Mm-hmm. Now, was that cool? I loved it initially, but I wanted to be in front of the camera. Yeah. And so I started to get depressed and started to figure out, well, how the hell do I get on the other side of this? Because I'm going to get stuck here. Yeah, I'm making $125,000, $150,000 a year. It's good for me, but I don't want to do this anymore. And I figured it out. And and when I was 34, I got Double Dare, and it changed my life. Yeah. So how hard do you want to work is the question. How passionate are you about what you want to do? Most people are lazy, and they talk about wanting to do something, but they never follow through. Luckily, I did.
I've always loved the phrase, fixin' to get ready to do something. Right?
That's like a Midwest term.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's Southern if you say fittin' to get ready to do something. Yep. But that's one of the things I talk about in therapy with people is the idea that you can do therapy or you can be fixing to get ready to do therapy.
Yep.
And if you're fixing to get ready to do therapy, nothing's going to change.
Nothing.
But if you're going to do therapy, you at least have the opportunity to change. It's not a guarantee.
No,
right?
but I have a line in my one-man show that says the harder you work, the luckier you get. And that's it. I was willing to put in the time and the effort. A lot of times I was not particularly good at what I did. But the more I did it, the more experience I got and the better I got. And so from the day I landed into Los Angeles until I got Double Dare was 13 years, okay? I was willing to put 13 years in to get it. And when I lectured at colleges, my opening line is, nobody got up this morning and said, I got to go get Marc Summers a job today.
Right.
Nobody cares about me.
Yeah.
My family might, and I know I do, but walking down the street, some producer, he didn't get up and go, gee, I wonder what Marc Summers is doing today. He doesn't care. He doesn't even remember me. I walk into buildings now and they go, are you still working? So, I never let that bother me. I'm knocking on doors every day. Still.
Sadly, and wait 15 years. Are you still alive?
Yeah, I know. I get that now. I didn't know you were still. If you go online, I get that. Is it true that Marc Summers is still alive? Well, hell, how old do you think I am?
Seriously, you're not that old.
It make me laugh.
In your one-man show, do you talk about OCD?
Everything. It's 100% about OCD.
Okay.
And it's about overcoming obstacles. Okay. The first was OCD and how it affected my life.
Yeah.
So OCD was the central part of the show. But then I got diagnosed with cancer, chronic lymphatic leukemia. And I was in chemo for 2 years, then I was good for a while, then I was in chemo again, then I was good for a while, then I was in chemo again. And I kept moving forward. I did not let that bother me. And then I got in a car accident. I wasn't wearing my seatbelt, and I broke every bone in my face.
Oh.
And so I hit the credit card machine when the car stepped on the brakes. It was a mess. So first OCD, then cancer, and then overcoming that accident. And nothing gets in my way. I just keep moving forward because I have whatever that is to take me to the next step. Not everybody's born with that, and that's okay. I'm peculiar and I'm demanding. Am I a tough boss? Yes. There are some networks when I don't produce anymore. I used to produce a lot. I did Dinner Impossible, Restaurant Impossible. I did a boatload of shows I produced for about 12 years, 15 years. I never want to do that again because I was a tough guy to work with because I wanted it. That's where the OCD came in there too. The reason the shows I did were so good, and they were, I helped put Robert Irvine on the map. I helped put Ryan Seacrest on the map. He was working for me when he got the call to go do American Idol, and I'm the one who made that happen. And there were other stories like Guy Fieri. I got Guy Fieri. I was hosting Next Food Network Star. I got him his agent, and on and on and on. And so opening doors for other people based on the success I have had is one of the most important things I can do right now, and I love that. Nancy McKeon's a friend of mine, and I hadn't seen her in a while. She came to see my show, and I went and had lunch with her. And I said, what are you doing now? And she said, I'm not doing anything. I'm trying to figure it out. I said, what do you want to do? She said, I've always wanted to do theater. I said, really? I said, I got a great producer who got my show up. Why don't you meet with her? Well, Nancy opens on Broadway in off-Broadway in December. Why? Because I made one phone call. Now, they wanted her. And when I said, what do you think about Nancy McKeon? They went, oh, my God, do you think she'd really do this? But the fact that I was able to connect her and make that happen. Robin Morella was my assistant on Double Dare for years. And her daughter graduated from college and wanted to be in the entertainment industry. And when I did my one-man show, she was my assistant on stage. I get such a thrill by watching people make it to that next step. Now, there was a period in time when I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was a kid, I was watching the Merv Griffin show, and Bob Hope was on for an hour. And at the end of that hour, Merv said, if you could point to one person who made your career, who would it be? And Bob Hope pointed to himself, and he said, on my way up, nobody helped me.
Yeah.
And I always said, if I make it at some point, I'm going to help other people. And I never forgot that. And that's what I've been able to do. So many people I've been able to take to the next step. Now, if they don't have the natural talent, it's on them. But if I can open that door and they can get that job, then they're on their own. But what a good feeling that is.
Yeah. And OCD is so good at robbing anybody of feeling good about anything. So
isn't that the truth?
It's got to be wonderful then, even on a day where it might be a tough day, to still be able to go, yeah, and I can still do good in the world, even though OCD tells me I'm not.
Oh, yeah. I know. And it's, so helping people with OCD when they say, I remember you when I heard you on Stern Show or Oprah, whatever, and now I got the help that I needed and I feel better. Or I read your book and it changed my life. Or helping people in the entertainment industry. You know, it's not difficult to pick up a phone and say, hey, what do you think? I got this person. Will you at least meet with them? And most people are nice and they'll do that. Not everybody will, but 80% of them will. And so to be in a position where you can open some doors, why not?
For those who are watching who are having trouble opening the door to therapy, getting diagnosed, opening up to a family member or friend, your story is hopefully very inspiring to them. What's your advice to them?
Just do it. I'm telling you, OCD is miserable. It sucks. I hated every moment of it. And when I finally, in my early 40s, started to open the door to get the information and the tools to help me cope, was a life changer.
Mm-hmm.
And it changed my relationship with my family. It changed my relationship with myself. And it's not easy, but it's so much easier than coping with it on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And what do you have to lose by trying?
Right.
You could be miserable the rest of your life, or you can stick your toe in the water and start to fix it. That's what I would do.
Yeah, and the water might be cold.
Oh, very. Yeah. Extremely. And you may want to get out of the pool for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to go back.
Yeah.
And the one thing, once I got in it, there was no going back.
Mm-hmm.
When I started to learn what intrusive thoughts were and why I was doing it, and that I wasn't the only one. That was the other thing. When I realized, actually, I thought I was crazy. Oh, I'm the only person in the world who thinks that if I don't do that, something bad will happen. No. He said, there's millions of people who feel that way. Really? I never met anybody. He goes, well, that's because they didn't open up about it. But believe me, you know somebody else who has these same feelings.
Yeah. And I don't have a job just for you.
Right. And so when you get the knowledge, what better thing? And that's what you got to do. You got to get the knowledge and realize that you're not the only one. And Howie Mandel is doing pretty damn good. I'm doing pretty damn good. And I bet if he went down and, I don't know any other people in the entertainment industry who have it who have come out, but I have other friends who've had it and have gotten help. And I just helped a friend of mine's son who was having severe OCD problems. And the way he's coping with it is by smoking too much marijuana. And that's putting him into another stupor. So I said, now you have two issues. You got to get rid of that, and then you got to get the tools to fix the OCD that's causing you to do that.
Right.
So now you got two things you got to worry about. But unless you start today, it ain't ever going to happen.
We now know from some research about a third of people will experiment with drugs or alcohol as a way to start managing the OCD.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really high, actually. I had a very privileged experience to be able to open the first residential treatment center that treated both OCD and substance use at the same time. But because I thought it was a problem that when we would say to someone, you have to be sober for 90 days before we can treat you, we just took away your coping strategy, which, not a good one, but then we want you to just have nothing for 90 days.
Not that easy.
That's relapse there.
100%.
That's relapse. Did, I don't know for you, if drugs or alcohol ever came into a role for anything?
I have never even smoked a cigarette.
Me neither, by the way.
I've never done any drugs. I was the guy who drove everybody home.
Yeah.
I would drink from time to time, but you know what? Over COVID, I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
So I'll do a glass of wine a month, maybe. Sauvignon Blanc, if you want to buy me a bottle. But I never had any interest. You know, the other reason why? I did everything to excess. And my feeling was that if I started doing anything in the drug world, I would probably kill myself.
Yeah.
So why even stick my toe in the water? This is before I even knew what OCD was.
Right.
But I knew in college that I would probably like it and do it all the time. And that's going to stop me from becoming a host of a TV show. And that was always my goal. I want to host a TV show, and I don't want anything to get in my way. So if I do drugs, that may screw that up, so therefore I'm not going to do it.
Obviously, it's annoying when people come up to you and will say, oh, I have a little OCD too, because that just, But the flip side of it, you must get people who come up and say thank you.
Oh, yeah. When I did my one-man show, we did a session with the OCD Foundation afterwards one night, which was great. But every night, somebody would meet me at the stage door and say, "Thank you," and I'd say, "Well, what'd I do?" And they'd say, "Came out and talked about OCD," and I didn't know what it was, and until you came out, and so I'm not germphobic or anything. There was a lot of hugging going on after the show with people who were able to make that leap to get help. And they say to me, and you don't realize, I never wanted to be a role model, whatever the hell that is. But when you're on television, when I just spoke at Stanford, a mother contacted me, and when her kid was about 11 years old, he wrote me a letter, and I called him. And the kid is now a very successful executive at Apple, and to this day gives me a certain amount of credit for the conversations we had because I was a role model on Nickelodeon. Yeah. And I had this book out that was in doctors' offices who treated OCD kids about how you can get better. And a lot of these kids saw this book and went, that guy on Double Dare has OCD? Oh, my God. So just through a quirky thing of luck, when Jerry Laybourne, who was the president of Nickelodeon at the time, found out that I came out with OCD, she said, "Oh my God, I apologize." And I said, "For what?" And she said, "Well, I didn't know." And I said, "Jerry, neither did I. I had no idea." So you don't need to apologize.
Darn you, Jerry, not reading my mind.
That's right. And I said, we put a network on the map. You put me on the map. It's all good. There's nothing negative that happened here. It's all good stuff.
Wow. Well, I think there can be nothing better in the world than influencing another life for the positive.
Oh, yeah.
And so thank you for what you have done for that, because the OCD community needs that, right? To know that there is some light at that end of that tunnel there. Yeah. And anybody's listening, go to NOCD. I'm telling you, these guys are doing it right. They're getting people out there to get the knowledge that they need, and you can do it online. There's something that didn't even exist before, right? And the fact that you can do it in the comfort of your own home, if you don't want anybody to know, turn on your computer, your iPad, or your phone, and do the work, and you'll be 100 times happier than you are now. I promise. Awesome. Well, Marc, thanks for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Doctor. I always learn a lot from talking to you guys, and I appreciate your time.
Awesome. And thank all of you for joining us. If you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, go to NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com. And we have expert therapists waiting to meet with you. And if you like the Get to Know OCD podcast, you can subscribe to the NOCD YouTube channel or get it wherever you get your favorite podcast. Thanks for joining. We'll see you again on another episode.